and I brought it up. It was interesting. This is called the Energy Security Amendments. And the chief sponsor was Ken Ivory, and Senate sponsor was Darren Owens. And then there were 42 co-sponsors in respect to this House bill. And it asked us to have an opportunity to contract the feasibility of the Intermountain Power Plant. And as the office Wheaties went through the process of doing this, there were several roadblocks in respect to getting it put together. The timeframes were interesting as we participated with that. I left my notes at the hotel, so I just found that out. But I do have a little bit of information that might be helpful. We began the process of starting the RFP on the 25th or 23rd of May. And we submitted the RFP to the state purchasing on June 5th. And that was quite a process that I had never been involved in. There was a lot of confidentiality in it. The state purchasing had some very strict rules, and we had the opportunity to have the RFP go out. I think we had it go to the 31st of May, and we had selected through the process Jackson and Walker, and we secured that contract on June 28th. And with the process of all of that, we had the opportunity to meet Michael, Dr. last name? Nassy, excuse me. We've interacted quite a bit over the last several months, and we've asked Mike to do a presentation in respect to this, and I think we'll turn the time to Michael.
Okay.
And identify yourself.
I'm glad to have you here, and if you could just introduce yourself and who you're with. So,
yes, thank you, Chairman. Mike Nassy. I'm a partner at Jackson Walker, so environmental energy law practice. I do work all over the country. I'm here really representing a team of folks. Jackson Walker contains the legal and some of the technical experts, but we also subcontracted technical expertise from 3 different entities. They're laid out in the report, and in the final report, we'll do a little bit more robust. The response to the RFP has extensive biographical material, so I won't take the committee's time talking about the team. You can refer to that. Very, very proud of the work that the team's done to date. We have a product that you all have in front of you that is frankly farther along than I thought we would get by this date, when I was told that this was our target date for at least getting something really close to final. We will, I think, have no problem getting you a fully polished final report by the end of October, hopefully sooner. There are key components of information we're waiting to get. We don't want to give you a half-baked analysis. So my intention, Chairman, was to walk briefly through, just kind of give everybody a once through lightly of the document without getting into any details, because we haven't really, it's kind of like Mark Twain said, I haven't had time to write you a short letter. The executive summary is not here. Because we don't have final conclusions on some things, and I wouldn't want to mislead anybody about where we're heading. Does that work for you?
well, yeah, I mean, you was awarded the contract in June, and you've already, I'd say you're pretty good on schedule.
Yeah, you can see, I'll start at the back of the document. The appendix reflects that we've had 23 detailed interviews, investigatory interviews with our technical and legal team and various stakeholders and sources of information. And that's at the very back. It's the only current appendix of our document. We'll have several by the time we finish this report. So that can give you a sense of who we've heard from. And that, of course, includes interactions with the folks at Intermountain Power. We have some outstanding data requests for them, but they have been cooperative and helpful. We're hoping for more finality on some key issues, but I'm optimistic that we'll get that. And I'll certainly let the committee know if that's not the case. So, there are 7 tasks outlined here. I wouldn't necessarily lay it out in this fashion if I was trying to build a story, but I mean, all the data is here. I thought what I would do is simply remind the committee what is in the document, and then I'll hit 3 of those 7 tasks because they're kind of at the heart of some of the key decisions I think that you all will be making in response to the report, perhaps. We start with the regulatory analysis in the document. We then do that's basically a legal regulatory analysis of the state of play that's applicable to Intermountain and would be applicable to the coal units if they continued on. We then talk about technical issues, everything from evaluating the control technologies that would and need or could possibly be installed at the existing facility to things that may happen in the future. But it also includes an evaluation of the various technical options that have been proposed for the Intermountain project that frankly our technical team was quite surprised, pleasantly surprised about some of the viability. We're not finished with our analysis. We're still, scrubbing the numbers, but there's some pretty interesting options there, and I'll touch upon that briefly today. There's a transmission analysis in task 3. There's an economic development and interest analysis as called for by the statute in task 4, an asset and liability analysis in task 5, an ownership structure analysis, which I will touch upon a little bit more today in task 6, which is, what could happen structurally to the Intermountain project to govern the facility if it were to continue. And then task 7 really goes into some grid and energy security issues. That's still in development. There's a lot of moving targets. We've had a very, air quotes, exciting summer of close calls in the grid. And so we're updating the information. And so with that, I'll jump right in to a kind of a once over lightly of those 3 tasks I highlighted: the regulatory analysis, the technical, and the ownership structure. So on the regulatory analysis, it's a pretty standard evaluation of the whole host of environmental regulatory programs that apply to the facility and where they may go and what the options for the facility are. From a legal perspective, the technical analysis, the next section actually talks about which widgets would have to actually be developed and installed to actually make the regulatory strategy work. So we have that laid out. And again, my job is not to read the report to you, but to flag some things for consideration. You would expect that we are evaluating a whole host of federal regulatory programs, everything from coal combustion residuals to the transport rule, the regional haze rule, carbon dioxide regulation, and some others. Air permitting, state air permitting is actually something that is important to consider given the way the new natural gas and hydrogen facility was permitted. Dependent upon the closure of the existing facility, it raises some important issues that will need to be resolved. I've already reached out to Council Elder to talk about, some of the legal implications of that. And so we'll give you a more robust discussion of the fact that the statute has made it very clear that things should not be done that would get in the way of continuing to use the coal facility, but also that they are, allowed to permit a new facility or pursue a new facility. But if the way that new facility was permitted actually would prevent the continued use of the coal facility, that of course raises an interesting question for you all to resolve. We will have that full discussion in the final report. I'm just flagging it to tell you that we're still trying to get an understanding. We're going to be having additional conversations with your environmental regulatory agency. We've already had a nice interview with them, but we'll be building on that. The technical analysis starts with an evaluation of like I said, the widgets that would be needed to be installed, everything from selected catalytic reduction, SCRs, to other technologies to actually make sure that the new facility is, I would say, equipped to hedge against the risk of new regulation. It's not a certainty that they have to put in new stuff, but we do full evaluations of what that stuff would be and how much it would cost. And we're going to have our numbers finalized in the final report, but we have a pretty robust discussion of that already in the report. We start with conventional air quality controls, things on NOx, particulate matter, ozone precursors, et cetera. And then we shift to CCR. Then we talk about coal combustion residuals. And then we talk about carbon dioxide. And then the very intriguing analysis of the different technical options that could be deployed at the facility is in section 4. And we lay out 4 options that our technical team thinks are the most viable for evaluation. Again, we haven't finalized and concluded anything, but we have been pleasantly surprised at some of the both technical and economic evaluation of these projects. The first that we discuss is a coal conversion to graphene and then hydrogen combustion project, which is intriguing and looks to have great promise. We talk about a couple of different standalone carbon capture and then local load projects, the idea of bringing data centers to actually consume some of the power. Some hybrid of these approaches, of course, is also potentially on the radar screen for the facility. And then we also talk about a syngas option. By exclusion of a lot of other ideas that have been thrown out, we're not making judgments about their viability. We just are focusing on the things that we actually think are economically and technically viable or potentially viable based on data. So we're going to try to give the committee something that is real to evaluate in the final report. And so that's the technical analysis. And I'm going to jump and, of course, stand for questions to the ownership structure. We do an evaluation in task 6 of the current, kind of this, the world on the ground in terms of the current governance of Intermountain Power. And then we take up, because the statute directed us to do this, potential options for either restructuring that entity or leaving it alone and creating a new entity that the state might own to pursue public-private partnerships for utilization of the existing facilities, to ensure that those, that significant investment in that asset is not decommissioned unless, all options have been investigated. So we do actually have a pretty robust discussion of our opinions about what is the path of least resistance there. And we talk about, of course, some of the things that the state is considering. What is its police power? What's its police power obligation to ensure resilience and reliability of the grid, but also maximizing the utilization of existing facilities. So it's been an honor to be involved in this project. I look forward to speaking with you all again once we're finalized, but I certainly stand for any questions Greg and I are ready to field at this point.
Okay, any questions from our, raise your hands. Go ahead, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's on, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
pull it up to you so you
Okay.
don't have to lean over.
So I think a large data center will use like 100 megawatts or something along those lines. So we're talking about I think it's almost a 2,000 megawatt facility. Where's that load going to come from if it's if it stays in its current format?
Yeah, it's a great question. The things that we're going to evaluate, and you see the beginnings of it in the current draft, are a multifaceted load approach. Utah is a growing state. It has load growth. It's got an asset that's vastly underutilized. It's down dispatched by the majority of its California offtake. So multiple data centers is not a unique concept, something that I'm certainly seeing all over the country. They're heavy loads, they're reliable, they're base loaded. I would not use a reference of 100 megawatts because it's all about how many units get attracted. It's how many companies want to co-locate. And there are economies of scale when multiple companies co-locate. And so the consortia that we have consulted with and we'll continue to talk about and we'll document in the final report, their analysis from the data center's viewpoint of what the potentiality is for multiple data center location. I envision, just as somebody who does this for a living, that you would have a hybrid approach. You would have locally located load if it turns out that the data centers are interested in doing that. And then you would also build out a transmission to actually serve Utah load. And you would use one to secure and hedge against the other. And it would benefit the state and the citizens to do that.
Okay. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Briscoe. Does your analysis include the water currently being used by IPP?
It's a great question. So water is a huge issue that we're not in final terms with in the report. You don't see a whole lot of discussion yet, but you will. Some of the technologies that we're evaluating actually are water plus. In other words, they actually generate water as opposed to net consume it. Creating power with steam electricity consumes water. Both a gas-fired hydrogen turbine and a coal-fired turbine both have water implications. The water rights and what the water can be used for are important considerations. I'll be honest with you, Representative. The scope of the project and the budget probably doesn't facilitate as robust a discussion of the potential options for leveraging that water right, but we will definitely have a technical discussion of the comparative water consumptive, net water consumptive situation of the different technologies. It's a central, we understand it's a central issue given the location of the facility. Frankly, it's a central issue of the entire nation, but for sure in Utah and the location of the facility.
Just one final question, Mr. Chair. It might be a silly question, but does the water used by electrical generating facilities require potable water, drinking water condition?
It does not, but it does require treatment. You know, when we heat and make steam to spin turbines, it needs to meet a spec. It's not necessarily the spec that we use for human consumption, but it is pre-treated. It does allow for a lot less costly treatment, but it is still pre-treated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And it's my understanding that IPP was supposed to have twice as big as it is, and they have water. They had water rights for the expansion of it. So, Senator Owens.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Mr. Nasty, you got my attention talking about, because I was a sponsor on the House Bill 425 on permitting something that might hinder the plant going forward. Can you speak more on that? Has that happened since the bill was passed, or?
Yes, so the facility, the new gas hydrogen facility was permitted in June of 22. And initial dirt work, I understand, in terms of commencement of construction, started in October, so before the bill. But the bill does obviously contain these kind of two provisions right next to each other. One is that, you know, things should not be done to prevent, you know, the continued use of the facility, but they can also pursue a permit and the things necessary to permit it. It's not a question of whether the new facility could be permitted without having to retire the coal unit. It could. And really, it's probably just a function of clarity. So the most specific question you ask is, they didn't do the permit after the statute, but they haven't used the permit to emit pollutants yet. And so I don't, you know, I'm an air lawyer, and I will tell you, you certainly have time to re-permit the new facility to prevent the preclusion of the utilization of the existing facility, but it is something that needs to be discussed probably pretty quickly. I think the existing authorities probably make it clear that they can do that. But if that was something you all wanted to clarify, certainly I'm sure the agency would appreciate that.
Helpful, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Owens. Director, go ahead.
I just wanted to make mention a couple of things. If you look at page 54, it shows kind of the list of the people that are the people in different companies that they had interaction with, and also ourselves. We, as the Office of Energy Development, were able to listen to the interviews to about 90% of these. I want to say Mike Natchi and Randy Eminger is one that kind of took charge of this. It was information was really good. There was great conversation back and forth with all of these people at all of these companies, and I thought it was important to bring that up. It was very professional on all sides, and as you can see, perhaps every 2 weeks we meet with the Jackson Lunch and have some conversations, things that we need to improve on, they need to improve on. So it's been a good process so far, and you know, we have another little bit of time to move forward with. So just wanted to make mention of that.
So very cooperative, and so
All parties were
all
very
parties are
cooperative.
cooperative. Well, we're all going to be in it together, sitting around in the dark one day. So if we don't do something, so get to know each other.
And
Any other questions?
I would just expand that one of those interviews was in fact with your Department of Environmental Quality, and we expect to have follow-up about the very issue that was just asked about.
Well, we'll see no other questions. So yeah, I can weigh in.
Well, just, I guess if I were to weigh in, I think it's incumbent on this committee and on the state legislature to make sure that we keep the lights on. And I know that Utah is outgrowing its resources. And EPA has told power companies that they're not permitting any new plants, even gas-fired plants. So we certainly have to keep what we have running at least long enough to bridge to whatever Star Trek technology may be coming next.
And we haven't even started really on the automotive part of it, where we're gonna need all the charging ability that everyone's wanting to go to electric vehicles. And so we need more power, not less, but anyway. We'll look forward to your final report then towards the end of October, is that correct?
Yes, for sure.
Okay,
That's
well, thanks for all your work and on such short notice. Thank you. We'll go ahead and move to it's just, we have Logan Shumway with Energy Fuels Resources. We'll turn the time over to you, Logan. Are you there?
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good deal. So yeah, I appreciate the invite to speak and present a little bit about what we're doing. I mean, I know it looks like I know a handful of you there. I mean, I was even going to open it up maybe in the beginning. I don't know, exactly everybody who was there, but I've got some slides that I know at least some of you have seen. Can do a quick intro, but I was going to maybe just see if there's some Q&A that we even want to go through in the beginning. I kind of wanted to leave it open to you guys to see how you wanted to proceed with this.
Let's see the slide.
The
We'll see the
slides.
slides first and then we can have some questions probably. Yeah.
Okay, good deal. So I sent some slides over.
So we're going to share them here.
Okay. So I'm Logan Shumway. I live in Blanding, Utah. I'm the site manager of the White Mesa Mill, which is just south of Blanding, Utah. So the White Mesa Mill is it's the last conventional uranium and vanadium mill in the United States, which is a pretty big statement. We used to have a lot, and our country uses a lot of nuclear power, even though there's kind of been a push in the past few decades, to try to get away from it. We still, the United States still runs off of, 20% of our power is from nuclear, which is a big, it's a surprisingly large amount, I think. And then the push has been, the sentiment, I think, recently in the past couple of years has very much changed to where nuclear is more accepted. And, some of the discussion just now was, talking about how much more power we're going to need going forward. And nuclear is really, about the only way we're going to get there realistically. So, and the good thing is it seems like people are getting to be where they're more and more on board with that. People are accepting that, and that's good. And so, yeah, that's what Energy Fuels does. That's what the White Mesa Mill has been doing for over the last 4 decades. And so here's some slides here. Let's see, can I control these slides, or is somebody else controlling
Sam
them?
will control it if you just tell her when to
Okay.
next.
Yes. So yeah, our mission here is to responsibly produce the critical materials needed for the energy transition. I mean, people don't realize, I don't think, or we just don't ever have to, that, all these things that we have, they literally have to come from somewhere. And most of these things are, it means they need to be dug out of the ground. In the case of nuclear uranium, you need to have literal, drums and barrels full of uranium to do this stuff. And where does it come from? And then it goes beyond uranium. What we do, all the elements that we deal with are very much tied to energy. Vanadium is another element that we produced for quite a while. Since 1980, there's a lot of attention there for large scale batteries for these renewable type of energy production. If wind, solar, it's intermittent, right? You don't have it during the night, and there's off times you need storage. Vanadium is used for that. We also produce vanadium. And then we also are producing rare earths, which is really exciting thing, something that is not done in the United States at all anymore. So let's go to the next slide, please. So yeah, here are the elements that I was mentioning. So I think it's helpful to really, try to get a visual of what we're talking about here. Uranium, we're familiar with that. That's down the lower part of the periodic table there. That's the U. The vanadium is the V. in blue there. Like I said, we produce that. And why we produce that, a little bit of background there is southeastern Utah, the whole Four Corners region is a world-renowned uranium district. And people know about uranium, but what they don't usually know is that anytime you have a uranium mine in that area, you usually also have vanadium associated with it. So that's just the mineralogy, the geology of that area of the world. And so vanadium's always been produced as a byproduct of uranium in southeastern Utah. So and then it's a little bit hard to see possibly, but the second to bottom row there, all those elements there, those are what people call the rare earths. And rare earths are something that people are hearing about now. I mean, I would guess that most of you have heard that term, rare earth elements. And the rare earth elements is a big long list of elements. Most of them are names that you haven't heard of. They're strange names, but those are like I said, that's a really exciting thing that we're doing now. It's something we've gotten into in just the last few years. And those are the elements that are required for a lot of these, more new, clean energy systems. Electric vehicles, they require these rare earth elements to make the motors and the magnets and everything that goes into them. Electronics, the usage for these is wide, and it's growing really, really quickly. And the United States doesn't make any of these things. In the case of rare earths, literally 0% is produced in the United States. So so we're really excited to be getting into that. All three of those elements, those groups of elements, are very, very critical, and we are producing all of those at our facility down in southeastern Utah. So it's a really, really unique facility. So that's a good kind of background as to what we do at the White Mesa Mill. So next slide, please. Can we go next? And I'm not hearing. Okay, there we go. Okay, so, and actually I'll just spend just a second here. There's a couple things on this list that I didn't mention yet. So it's a very, very unique and critical production line that we have. Sorry, if we can go back one slide.
This one you want, it's got the
It's the list.
critical product line.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple things there that I want to touch on. Okay, so I mentioned uranium, rare earths, and vanadium. One other thing that's exciting, and we also do is medical isotopes. That's on we're more in the research and development phase on that, but most of the medical isotopes that are used for cancer treatments are not very available, and they're coming out with new types of cancer drugs which require they're not new elements, they've always existed, but elements that are not currently being produced commercially, at least not domestically. And so there's a gap there, for advancing some of these cancer treatment drugs. There's a gap there in having the materials available that's necessary for those drugs in the United States. And we all know how easy it is to permit and license new industrial facilities in our country, especially things that involve radioactivity. It's not an easy thing, but where we already are doing that's something that we can move into a lot easier and quicker than other people could. So that's something that we're excited about. This is going to help develop new cancer drugs. We recycle uranium bearing materials. Uranium is not uncommon. I don't know. There's a whole discussion there that I could go into, but you need in our country, in any country, you need a place that you are able to safely dispose of radioactive materials, which people people don't make radioactive materials. They already exist in the ground. That's I always tell everybody, you know, God put them here, and in not necessarily small quantities. And just as a nature of, you know, doing the things we do as people, I mean, even producing bricks, there was a brick making facility that they had a small amount of byproduct where uranium was coming out of their brick making process. And you need somewhere for that stuff to go. And that's what we do too. So that's another important aspect of our facility. And again, doesn't exist in any other facility. We're the only one literally in the United States that can do those things. So that just kind of, you know, points out the, I don't know, the importance of, you know, us keeping this facility in existence. Okay, so next slide. And one more thing there as we're going to the next slide. Thorium is not listed. I think the San Rafael facility, you know, everybody knows about that. They're probably presenting here today. They have a need for thorium, hopefully in the future. And we're one of the few facilities, and again, maybe the only one in the United States currently that has the potential to produce that on a commercial scale, which we're also working on. So a pretty unique list of products. Yeah, are we able to go to the next slide there?
We're seeing the next slide on uranium.
Okay, there we go. Showing up there for me now. Okay, I've listed most of this. We can go on to the next one. Uranium's important. I think we all understand, you know, where that's used and the need for it.
We're looking at the rare earth slide now.
Okay. Apparently there is a lag between mine and what you
Yeah.
guys are seeing. So rare earths. You know, I mentioned that a little bit now, but that's, you know, let's see. That is, let me see, I'm pulling it up on my computer here. So I make sure I'm speaking to what you guys are seeing. So the rare earths, you know, that I've just got listed there the uses of it, and you know they're becoming more and more. You know, the demand is growing. We can go to the next slide. The next slide there is maybe the, you know, one of the big takeaways. If I was just going to make a small list of takeaways here about rare earths and what we're doing, none of these rare earth elements are currently made in China. The processing of this happens exclusively in other countries, and we are probably the largest consumer of them. I don't have that data, but you know, COVID, one of the good things that COVID did do is I think it, you know, woke people up to the reality that our stuff comes from somewhere and it doesn't just happen automatically. And, you know, when we saw supply chains, you know, disrupted, and it made people a little bit more, you know, aware of and worried about where things are coming from. And in the case of rare earths, it's a big problem for us. And especially when we realize how much we are dependent on these things, especially in energy, you know, going to these newer technologies with energy, EVs specifically. If that's really where this country is going to go, we have nowhere near close enough rare earth production to make all these electric vehicles. And the problem is, even if we, you know, some other country makes them, it leaves us out of that whole manufacturing process. We are not in control of it. We cannot do that domestically. And the big takeaway with that big round ring, this round graph there is it's all red pretty well. The red represents China. So most of this, you know, China has deliberately monopolized the rare earth industry. You know, this needs to be on people's radar. They have used this. I mean, they've come out and said that they would use this as kind of a weapon, so to speak. They did this, and they proved that with Japan about a decade ago. You know, they cut them off from rare earth. So you know, this rare earth production, where it comes from, is a big problem for us, frankly. So the next slide. Here, this is just showing, again, I think it might sound silly, but it's important for people to realize that all these things there, there's some pictures of actual stuff, right? Things that make the power go to our houses, which we all take for granted on some level. I mean, it takes real things, and those have to be produced anywhere. And if we really get down to the data of it and the details of these industries, not much of it comes from the United States. So next slide. Yes, so this is showing rare earths and uranium and energy fuels and why this makes sense. I guess I'd like to just explain this a little bit. Most of the rare earth ores, so the rocks in the ground, so to speak, that contain rare earths, they usually contain and almost always contain radioactive elements as well. So they contain uranium and thorium. And that's one of the big reasons why the United States quit producing rare earths, is because of this radioactive component. And as environmental and just all, everything got more strict in the United States, it got harder and harder for people to be able to work with these radioactive materials. And so we source that out to other countries. But why this works for energy fuels in our facility in southeastern Utah is because we've been dealing with uranium for over 4 decades now. So we're already licensed, trained, have the expertise and the facilities to manage radioactivity. And so the uranium and the thorium that's associated with these rare earth ores are not, they're not only are they not a problem for us, but they're part of what we want. They're part of our product. So we can go and take the uranium out as well, and hopefully the thorium in the future for some of these different types of nuclear reactors, for thorium reactors, and turn those into a value add as well. So it's just it's kind of a stars aligning thing that's progressed really well, really quickly. And so the next slide, we can go to the next slide. It kind of shows a timeline. And I think this timeline is really important too, just kind of the general story that this tells. We all know how long everything takes in the world. Government things take forever. Industrial things the same way. There's a lot of talk, a lot of planning, a lot of studies. A decade from start to finish is probably a pretty quick timeline for getting a project finished, right? But this shows that we just in the last few years, so 3 years to be specifically, we went from zero, not knowing what a rare earth element was, frankly, to being in commercial production of them. And we're advancing that still to more advanced products, recovering more of them. And this has all happened, like I said, starting back in 2020. So that's what's different about us and what our company's doing, what our facility's doing, is it's real stuff. There's not a lot of talk with it. It's more just, we are doing it and we'll continue to advance it. So, I guess we've kind of been telling people, I mean, there's been government agencies at the federal level and, quite a few things they put out to help fund rare earth development. We're like, if you guys really want to solve this problem, I mean, we are currently solving it. We don't need a lot. We don't need a lot of time and studies. I mean, we're doing it now. Hopefully we get supported. We don't know what that support looks like necessarily, but we are, it's a lot more doing than it is talk relative to other projects and companies out there. So next slide, this just, I don't know, some photos that kind of speaks to that. We're literally doing this stuff every day right now. And so, we're going to do this. We're going to be producing rare earths and uranium this year, next year, and for a long time. We just need to do it at a larger scale than we are. And we need to take the rare earth elements to a more advanced state, because there's a lot of steps in the rare earth processing life cycle, or I don't know what to call it, but there's quite a few steps to get it to the final product, I guess. And the final product is mostly magnets, and we're not making magnets yet. That's the goal. Magnets should be produced in the United States, specifically in Utah, for my preference, San Juan County. Um, but they're not right now, and we're still on the pathway to getting, to that advanced product, the final product of a magnet. That is the goal. So the next slide, actually, let's skip to the summary and conclusion slide. So for those of you who don't know about us or don't know much about us previous to this, we're the only uranium mill left in the U.S. We have a large uranium production capacity. We are very underutilized right now. We could produce a lot of uranium. Market conditions and regulation conditions are such that we're not producing much right now, but we could. We're the most advanced rare earth producer in North America. We're one of the only potential to produce thorium, which could be a big thing. A huge fraction of critical elements come from other countries. Uranium, I didn't talk about this much, but a lot of our uranium comes from, Russia and Russia kind of controlled areas. Very, very little from the United States, 1 to 2% of what we're currently consuming comes from the United States. That's just not okay. We're so dependent on other people. And I guess the good thing here, though, is domestic production is possible of all these things. At the White Mesa Mill for sure, but other places as well. It's possible if we just want to really, tend to business and start doing what we need to do and make this a priority. So that is all the slides. Yeah, if anybody has any questions.
Okay, we'll open up to questions. Anyone? Go ahead, Representative Lyman.
Thank you. Thanks, Logan. It's good to see you on the screen.
Yeah.
Appreciate the report. The national monument that was designated down on the Arizona Strip just recently, what is that going to do to supply of uranium for the mill, and kind of timing wise, what's the outlook with that?
Well, we don't really know for sure. What we think we know right now is our one existing kind of active mine. It's the Pinyon Plain mine on the south rim of the Grand Canyon. It is within the new monument, but that is grandfathered in, and we think that will be unaffected. And I say that a little bit loosely. We all know how this goes. There's always little hangups, access to roads and things like that. But I guess generally speaking, that mine we think will be okay. All of the other existing claims that our company has and other ones, and there are a lot. I mean, that is a world-class district for uranium there. There's a lot of uranium that this country could get access to what was in that designated monument. So all the other ones, that's where we're really unclear on our claims. We don't know if we're going to be able to proceed with those other mines or not at this point. It's just they haven't given us much information. It's been very vague.
How much of the uranium that the mill processes comes from there versus, like the stuff that you're reprocessing? I mean, would you still have a good supply chain without the Pinyon?
No, the main source, I mean, so the mines down on the Arizona Strip, so the Pinyon mine and the other ones, they're the highest grade uranium mines in the United States. They're about 1% uranium, 0.5 to 1%, which is really high. The ones up around, the Blanding area, they're more around 0.2% to give you a feel for how good those mines are down there. So no, if all things were, without any of these other details and monuments, I mean, most of the ore, if we're going off the economics, most of it would come from down on the Arizona Strip. So there are other mines, but the Arizona Strip is where the most economical uranium is at this point.
Thanks. And Chair, when I first became a county commissioner back in 2010, I started on the task force for the Arizona Strip with the commissioners down there. I think Lynn might have been a little bit after that, Lynn Siderud. But we were having these discussions trying to prevent the moratorium that was being proposed by the new Obama administration. And by the end of 2011, one of the biggest advocates and one of the biggest funders of that whole effort came to the table and said, we're not going to be involved from here on out because we sold to Hillary Clinton and the Russians. It was uranium one, so we lost one of the biggest advocates that we had, and they were one of the biggest holders of the uranium that were down there on the Arizona Strip. They also have the most claims of uranium that's in the Bears Ears National Monument. For what it's worth, there's a little bit more going on here than meets the eye for most of us, and the agenda that's out there can target some of these producers, and hopefully the legislature is in a position to see that and put in place some of the structure security measures that keep these businesses open.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Owens.
Yeah, just a question on other part of the presentation. I was just wondering if are there tailings that can be reprocessed right now for rare earth existing mines? Is that a process that is in?
Mr. Shumway, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah.
Did you hear it?
So asking about processing tailings for rare earth recovery.
Yeah.
All of the rare earths that we're recovering right now are coming from a byproduct stream. It's heavy mineral sands. People are mining titanium and zirconium in other parts of the country, and as a byproduct, they get this rare earth, this rare earth ore. So it's not tailings in this case that we're working with. I mean, there is the potential for that if there ever is a tailing source that has a significant amount of rare earths in that, we could potentially do that. But right now, that's not what we're processing.
Thank you. And just a comment on what Representative Lyman was saying, Mr. Chair, is that it seems that this is a national defense issue too, not just for the energy source, but it's troubling where we're headed. Thank you.
Yeah, comment on that. I was shocked when I saw on one of the local news channels when the monument designation came out that it said, new monument designated to stop uranium mining. And that's what's just, I can't believe that that's an acceptable thing to even say. That's not the reason you make monuments. But that's why this one was made. And make no mistake, that is a world-class uranium district down there. There's a lot of uranium that can come from there still. So we remain optimistic that we're going to get our heads on straight and be able to utilize that for electricity at some point in the future. But yeah, we need to realize that we lost a lot. If that's all locked up forever, we as a country lost a lot there.
Thank you. Representative Briscoe. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome via virtual. I'm looking at your slide showing April 2020 to 27. And if I had my chemistry major daughter here, she'd tell me what all those symbols stand for. And I don't know. But if your slide goes through to 2027, will you still be shipping a processed ore to Estonia for final separation work? If you do
No.
as outlined, no, you'll be able to do all the separation here.
Yes. So that's the next phase. We're really excited about this. We're installing the circuits to do separations at the White Mesa Mill right now as we speak. That's going to start up in Q1 of next year. Because yes, right now we make a rare earth concentrate. So it is a final product in a sense, but then it needs further processing. And that is happening right now in Estonia, which was referenced. But that is that's the phase we're working on now, is making those separations happen here at the White Mesa Mill. And then we would not need to ship that to Estonia.
Mr. Chair, just one final question, if I could.
Please.
You may or may not want to comment, but I read that there's a big operation going up in Texas, which says they will, when they are up and running, they say they're going to be able to separate 16 of the 17 REEs. They're also trying to get Round Top going again in California. Any comments from White Mesa, from your company?
Any compliments, meaning some kind of collaboration there?
Or competition or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I guess technically it's all competition. I mean, there is plenty of capacity here. I mean, the merrier, I would say. There's I've been involved with this firsthand, and I see the huge obstacles that go into, getting something from a concept to actual commercial production, and we're all going to have a hard time. There's lots of obstacles that are presented for all of us, but where we are already doing it, I mean, we're definitely out there ahead of some of these other projects. But by all means, I mean, I hope everybody does well in the U.S. Frankly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Oh, Representative Albrecht.
Thank you, Chair Hinkins. Sorry I'm not there today, but hopefully I'll get to feeling better soon. Question, follow up to Representative Lyman's. Logan, tell me, is the Pine Up mine affected by the new monument? No, excuse me, the Hack Canyon mine?
The hack. So well, there's quite a few different claims. I think the hack, that's a previously mined one. We have some other valid and existing claims, and that's where we are unclear. They haven't really told us what that's going to look like to develop those. So we don't know, and we're I don't know. I don't want to say we're pessimistic about it, but we think that there's going to be problems. Is our suspicion.
I would just comment that Logan's right. Anytime you can get 1% or 2% uranium out of ore, that's remarkable. Most of the Colorado Plateau stuff is 0.1 to 0.2, as he mentioned, and it just seems like if if we're going to go down this road of EV, we're getting mixed signals from our administration, and it's tough to operate under those conditions. Thanks for your report, Logan.
Yes, thank you.
Senator Boone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is exciting. I think there's certainly a need for a lot of these rare earths going forward. We're going to see some increased demand there. I do want to ask, what are your plans to address some of the existing kind of Clean Air Act and groundwater contamination we've seen? I know that's been, in the news, made some headlines in recent years, and certainly don't want to see that going forward if we are going to scale up operations to address other needs.
Yeah, are you talking about specifically at the White Mesa Mill?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know specifically off the top of my head, but that would certainly be one of them.
Yeah, so we've really had a great track record with environmental protection and the protocols and everything that we follow. Since we're the last uranium mill, we're in the crosshairs of a lot of these activist type groups, and so a lot of misinformation is out there. We all know how that goes, but if we get to the specifics of any of the claims of if somebody said, "Hey, I've heard that you guys had a problem or an issue or an environmental release or something like that," if we could sit down with any of those people and say, "Okay, what are you talking about here?" and go through the facts with them, we would say, "No, we haven't had any major issues of any kind. We've got a really amazing record as far as environmental protection." So anything that's been out there and that's been reported is in some cases outright lies, and in a lot of cases just a lot of misleading information that doesn't tell the accurate story. So no, we're proud of our record in that regard.
Have you sat down with any of those folks? I mean, it seems like that's kind of a big accusation, I would say, to lob out there. There's outright lies and that sort of thing. That's pretty bold. So have you had a chance to sit down with any of these folks that have put those allegations out there?
Oh, absolutely. But it's not all that bold. I mean, we know it's not too sexy of a thing for a media outlet to say, "Hey, everything's good here. No big deal." No, it's very there's a lot of incentives for media type people to say, "Ooh, this is a scary situation. Radioactivity, that's a headline that's going to take notice." going to get noticed by people. So yeah, we want to sit down with everybody. We put it out there. We don't get a fair shake, plain and simple, in the media. We absolutely do not. There are outright lies that have been put in a lot of media, mainstream media outlets in Utah specifically. So yes, we are happy to sit down with anybody about any of those issues. And the state of Utah is as well. The Department of DWMRC that regulates us, all this information is public. They're willing to sit down with people and talk to them about our record and what we do, what's real and what's not. And it's the misinformation and the lies are a problem.
Thanks.
Thank you. And we might just add, a lot of the people, I was surprised when they were picketing down there one time that you guys actually are cleaning up stuff. What big tanks of water that's been contaminated with uranium that you guys are cleaning up. Otherwise, we would have nowhere to go with it. No one's willing to take it. And I just can't believe that they're, I mean, it'd be one thing, but go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. If people were genuine in their concerns to clean up, in some cases, they would be our advocates, not our enemies. We're absolutely a cleanup site in a lot of ways. We are a recycler, a true one that recycles uranium. Absolutely. Yeah. There's just, it's really unfortunate what gets portrayed and said about us, but I think we're doing good things and starting to educate people and turning the tide there. And over time, people will see what we do. And I think things will work out fine in that regard. There will always be, that group of people that wants to, kind of shut things down in this industry. But, I think we're doing good things. So we're optimistic about where we're going.
One thing about it, you won't have to worry about anybody encroaching upon you, building homes around you, because you're surrounded by monuments. They won't be building there, that's for sure. So, but
that's true.
But could you just simplify and tell these guys? I mean, a lot of them haven't had a chance to want to tour down there. How simple it is, the way that uranium is attracted to diesel fuel and to the salt that releases it and stuff like that. Just to let us know how it's processed. A simple explanation.
Yeah, the processing is, we take the rock, we grind it up, we dissolve the uranium, put it into a solution form with sulfuric acid, and then we do a separation process called solvent extraction that isolates the uranium, and then we can precipitate it and put it into a solid form that then goes on to the next stages of the nuclear fuel cycle. We've been doing it for quite a long time, so it's relatively well known and easy process. And when we're really happy, I'll put it out there to everybody. Truly, get a hold of us. Get a hold of me specifically. If anybody would like to tour and sit down and talk about any of these things, talk about what we do, talk about the what we talked about here at the last part. These different allegations and concerns that are out there, which we think it's valid to have concerns. We want people to ask questions and we want to be able to answer it for them, because there are answers and there are explanations for all these things. We're really proud of what we do, and we'd be happy to give anybody a tour of our facility. So it's been an open invitation for quite a while, and we appreciate the people that have been to the mill, because there's been quite a few that have come in and seen us.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from our committee? Seeing none, thanks for your time. I'll let you get back to work.
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and hear from Christine King with the Idaho National Laboratories. She is online.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Sam, do you want to share the slides, or would you like me to do that?
You can if you're able to.
Yep, I'm capable.
There you go.
Okay, so I just wanted to offer my sincere apologies for not being there in person. That certainly was part of my plan today. It just had some health issues crop up in the family here that prevented me from being able to travel. But I'm glad that the rest of the game team was able to be there. Donna Kemp Spangler is our Director of Communications. She also works in the laboratory with our Frontiers Energy project, which Paul Gelander supports, and Tay Stevenson is a contractor supporting GAIN as well. So I encourage you to ask questions of them after I disconnect from the virtual meeting. A little bit about myself. This is my 30th year in nuclear power. Clearly, I like this technology, but I'm not here to sell you on it. I just wanted to offer an update on kind of what's going on relative to other states, and do a little bit of a deep dive on coal repurposing with nuclear energy. Prior to joining the laboratory, I spent 27 years with the operating fleet in the United States and Canada. So I come into the laboratory with a commercial background. GAIN specifically is built to think about how we use the assets of the National Lab and the Department of Energy with private companies that are interested in exploring nuclear energy, as well as states and communities. So with that, I'll get started here. This gives you an overview of kind of all the things that we've been doing in GAIN. On the left-hand side are the activities associated with supporting our advanced nuclear developers. So the top left corner is our voucher program. The simplest description of our voucher program is a private company writes the work scope and I pay the bill. What's better than that? So it's up to $500,000 of research per application. And there is a 20% cost share, but that can be done with, it does not have to be cash. It can be done with in-kind support. We're very proud of our voucher program. It's been in place since 2016. Over that time period, we've awarded 86 vouchers and completed 58. The work scopes are meant to be completed within a year, such that we're helping these companies turn their products faster, turn their research faster towards commercialization. At this point in time, we've worked with over 50 different companies, and all for a relatively modest amount of money, just shy of $31 million. Below that is what we call our legacy document project. So the national labs across the board have done a significant amount of work building and demonstrating different types of nuclear reactors. The data and in terms of design, as well as operating data, is incredibly valuable to the entrepreneurs of today. So our team works across all the national labs to digitize, classify, and release that information for our public companies to use. On the right-hand side, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail, but basically it's looking at the type of engagement that we do at the states and communities. And then I'll talk a little bit about coal repurposing. Along the bottom here, we maintain a website of it's a curated website of industry milestones. So if you're interested to see what's going on in advanced nuclear, not only with technology, but with regulation and finance and those types of things, this is an excellent website to look at. What I like the most about it is when you click on one of these boxes, you get 2 paragraphs to read. What is the milestone and why is it important? There's a link if you want to go deeper into the subject, but it's a really great website to just browse. I know you've had different presentations about what's going on in the States, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. But this just gives you an idea of what's been going on over the past 2 years relative to legislation passed associated with advanced nuclear or nuclear energy. We've passed there's been 34 bills in 23 states passed. The predominant subject is feasibility studies or task forces that have been put in place. You can see that we still have 11 states with a moratorium. I feel like if I could have animated this, Illinois should be blinking. Illinois had lifted their moratorium. The governor vetoed it. The Senate is having some discussion of overruling the veto. So just stay tuned. Illinois might lift their moratorium yet this year. Real briefly, I just would like to kind of underscore, these are all the states on the right-hand side that we've been engaged in. So we do reach out proactively to introduce GAIN and who we are and understand what kinds of things are under consideration at a state legislative level and in some communities. But we don't go anywhere we're not invited back. It is very important to us that we're working with local leadership and state level leadership as appropriate. So our idea is not to come into your state and tell you what to do. Our idea is to partner. Sometimes nuclear energy can be intimidating. So we're hoping that out of our engagement, you understand the value of your regional and local assets and how they might fit into the new nuclear future that's underway, and understand how to engage with that, with those communities. I will point out on the right-hand side, the darker blue are places where we've been invited to testify. And I also would like to point out that our calls and visits and testimony, they're not canned presentations. So I would encourage you to always reach out and ask for what you need. Even if the GAIN team is not the right team to get it for you, we will search within the national labs and the DOE to help you find what you need. Switching gears a little bit. I know I'm not telling you guys anything new in this space, but our coal plants tend to be in rural, under-resourced communities. The utilities are small and don't have big balance sheets to carry a nuclear project. There's mixed models of ownership and desires. What do I mean there? Some of the owners find it easier just to announce a retirement date instead of the putting in the elbow grease and the work associated with repurposing. And I'm not meaning to be rude there, but repurposing is a challenging subject to take on. And we hear this a lot. Who should move first? Community, state, or utility? And I think the best that I've seen is when you're all moving together. As such, we, jumped ahead like 3 there. There we go. As such, about 18 months ago, GAIN decided to do 2 pilot studies getting into the details. And this really comes from my commercial background and my project experience. The devil's in the details when you think about repurposing in any type of large facility. So we wanted specifically to work with 2 non-nuclear utilities. Our first plant was the Coronado Generating Station, owned by Salt River Project. We were actually approached by the mayor's office in St. John's. All they had was a retirement date. They felt like nuclear might be an option, but they didn't have any way to investigate that. So we approached the utility and we partnered with them to do a feasibility study. We just rolled that feasibility study out last week and it had 3 parts to it. A screen of the site for exclusionary and avoidance factors, a narrowing of the technologies that might fit their business objectives for that site. They intend for this site to primarily produce electricity at the same rates or higher, depending upon deployment date and electricity demand. And we also did an economic assessment, which is publicly available for the two counties, Apache and Navajo County, that the employees tend to reside in. Those counties do cross over into Navajo Nation. So next week we intend to meet with the Navajo Nation and review the results of this study as well. We did a community meeting last week. A lot of the questions were associated with water availability. How much more or less water might the nuclear station take other than the coal station? Our next study is in Kentucky. It's the Gent generating station. What's interesting about this particular project is the station is one of the largest stations in Kentucky at just over 1,900 megawatts, and is planned for retirement in the late 2030s or early 2040s. However, when you drive to the station, you pass multiple steel manufacturing mills, at gypsum plants. They have a lot of industrial customers that they're supporting within 5 miles of the plant. It sits on the Ohio River. And so what we've been doing with them is a site screening similar to what we did for Coronado, as well as a technology assessment based on their business objectives. We have done some initial outreach to their industrial customers to understand the types of inputs they need to determine which of these technologies might be a good fit for supporting their industrial customers that are asking for clean energy as well. This particular study will be published by the end of the year. We will be reviewing it with the utility in the October timeframe. Whoops, I'm on the wrong screen here. There we go. Just to give you an idea, sorry, my title there is in white, so it doesn't come up very well. But these are the states that have publicly shown interest in coal repurposing with nuclear energy. And I'd be glad to circle back and talk about any of those items if you might like. There are other states that are considering but are not, either the utility is not public or the state is not public, that type of thing, but it is a very active conversation. One of the things that we run also is to ensure that there's not duplication in this space from a research perspective. We gather different research organizations on a monthly basis and compare notes. We know there's a small time frame associated with making these kinds of decisions, and we really want to make sure that our work is adding to one another and not duplicative. You see here, we expect, these are the number of new reports. The Bipartisan Policy Center report is out, but we're expecting 5 more reports by December of this year, in addition to the pilot studies I mentioned before. And with that, if you're interested in the subject, we are hosting a conference in Morgantown, West Virginia, November 14th and 15th. This is trying to really help everyone have the latest and greatest of what we know and what we think in this space. And then on the second day, we'll have some breakout sessions to talk about what we should focus on next. And with that, I'll just end with, this is the GAIN team. Many of us are located at Idaho National Labs, but we also have Andy Worrell and Hussein Khalil. Andy's from our Oak Ridge National Laboratory and Hussein's from Argonne. And I encourage you to reach out to any of us. That's all I had.
Okay, thank you. We'll see from our committee. Is there anyone that has any questions? Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question. So as you've been transitioning or I think transition was the word you used, like in the Coronado Generating Station in St. John? Is that they're shutting down a coal plant and you're building next to it a nuclear plant? Or help me understand, are there facilities that exist in the coal plant that you can use? And what kind of nuclear plant? I'm trying to grasp maybe a little bit more of the project detail than what you had time to go through.
Sure. So the Coronado Generating Station, so basically when we approached the utility, they had a retirement date for the plant. They had no intention of doing anything else with the site. When we volunteered to do the study for the nuclear state to look at a nuclear replacement, they also did a full repurposing study with Kiewit for other low carbon resources that might fit into the site. With both of those studies, the utility has decided to repurpose the site. And right now they're moving into their planning stages to look at what technologies they might deploy in phase one, which would be in the early 2030s, and what might they deploy in the mid 2030s to the 2040s. They've been very clear that they do not want to be first or second in building an advanced nuclear plant. The technologies that screened in for them based on the business objectives they gave us and the megawatts they intended to produce really put them in the mid-sized reactors. So think anything from, 50 megawatts to about 600 megawatts would be the right sizes based on the different scenarios they gave. Every technology comes with its pros and cons. So we tried to, in our report, give them a feel for what those pros and cons were based on their objectives. Relative to reuse and how you might do this. So one of the things that we've determined in repurposing any site that probably needs to be investigated, if not first, but early, is the transmission rights. And so by building adjacent to and deploying other resources, you can have a continuity in your transmission rights. That's not always true, but typically is true. And so that continuity of transmission rights is something that you want to figure out in your project plans. Continuity of your workforce as well. And so when you add those two business objectives into the electricity production, you do tend to end up with building adjacent to. So needing to have land adjacent to the facility, either that's already owned or could be purchased.
Can I
The
ask a
types
follow-up
of things,
on that?
the types of things that you can repurpose easily: transmission, substation, water, rail, administrative buildings. What gets more challenging is anything in the secondary side of the coal plant, thinking like your turbine and your generator. And that's because sometimes the safety envelope of the nuclear plant, depending upon, and it's because of the way we have to plan for accident scenarios and heat removal, sometimes that can bleed over into your secondary side. So that's where repurposing further into the plant and reusing the turbine and the generator can be challenging.
Thank you. Just one quick follow-up on the continuity issue. I don't know that we mentioned the date that they were told to decommission their coal plant, but it sounded like the replacement nuclear plant was a bit far out. Are the dates, are they going to be able to have continuous power generation Are they gonna be able to have the coal last until the date you have the nuclear going?
No, so this is where the phase 1 and phase 2 of their project timeline make the most sense. So there's a number of low carbon, no carbon technologies that screened in for the site. So looking at wind and solar and maybe some long duration battery storage in the phase 1, which and operating maybe in parallel with the coal station. And then looking at the later phases, doing a nuclear station. There's a lot more the utility has to do before, I mean, what they've committed to is a repurposing study. What they have to decide next is what does that project look like and what are the technologies and when. Setting aside those two projects though, if you're not ready to pick a technology, one thing you can do for a site proactively is to do what's called an early site permit. It allows you to do the environmental reviews and license the site for nuclear energy. And then you would come back later to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in the development of an early site permit. You develop a plant parameter envelope as well. So think about like a bounding analysis. And as long as your technologies come back and fit into that envelope, you would go back to the NRC and say, we would like to operate this technology here, and you would apply for an operating license. So you could do your environmental permitting, you could start some civil construction, you could do some remediation around your coal plant while you're continuing to investigate the nuclear technologies. The early site permit is valid for 20 years.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? When you was talking about, was it Illinois or Indiana that was almost ready to,
Illinois.
and isn't most of their power generated by nuclear presently?
Yes, it is. It's so they had a moratoria associated with building new nuclear. This is not uncommon. We've seen even in the new legislation that has been passed, lifting moratoria or incentives, including nuclear in other states. Folks are being careful about how they craft that language and being specific that they want to be building an advanced reactor. We do have a taxonomy document that can help in if you're considering policy where those words might be included. Small modular reactor is more of a marketing term and maybe not as specific as you want it to be. Currently in New Hampshire, they remain having my favorite taxonomy to date. It's a class 5 Gen 4 reactor. Even I'm not real sure what class 5 is, but that's what I'm sure it relates to something in the state. I just haven't looked it up at this point. But a lot of this has been around states being clear that they don't want to get involved in a large light water reactor project similar to the Vogel station in Georgia.
Okay. Well, seeing no other questions, we really appreciate your time and presentation. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Your
And
staff as well, and your helpers.
feel free to hook up with Paul and Tay and Donna, and I'll put my email in the chat. Samantha knows how to get a hold of me as well. But anyway, I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm
Bye-bye.
going to Commissioner Citrid, Sandra Fell Research Center.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. For the main reason would be just to be able to thank most of you that have been working with the Energy Research
Need to have you
Center.
introduce yourself so the
Oh,
people that are listening. So
I'm Commissioner Sittard from Emery County. The previous commission in Emery County was the driving force behind the Santa Fe Energy Research Center. I've been its cheerleader since we started. We were invited to come here to you today to let you know what was happening there. I'm going to turn the time over to Dr. Pearson and Dr. Fry to tell you in depth what's happening at the center. I just wanted to take a moment before I turn the time to them and thank all of you. This facility has investment of approximately $2.5 million from Emery County and a little over $3.5 million from the federals. But the lifeblood of the Santa Fe Energy Research Center has been the state. Between the legislature and CIB, you guys have built a world-class facility there. And I just like to let you know that it's very appreciated how the state has stepped up and helped build something that should serve the state for well into the future. And so with that being said, I'll turn the time to Dr. Fry and Dr. Pearson and let them
thank
show
you,
you some
Commissioner.
intelligence.
Thank you.
Can I say something just?
Yeah,
on
go
that?
ahead.
Yeah, first, thanks, Commissioner. And while it's true that the states put some money in, CIB's put some money in, it was Commissioner Siderud that really stepped forward with the offer of a location and a place. This is so important to the state. So our gratitude really is to Emery County and what they've been willing to put forth, because certainly it's not an industry that only affects Emery County. It affects the whole Western United States, with the whole United States. So
yeah.
So thank you for what you've done for us.
Yeah, agreed.
Guys.
I'm Dr. Jeremy Pearson. I'm currently the director of the Center for Energy Research Center, and it's been a pleasure to work with Commissioner Sittard and a pleasure to speak before you as legislators today. And a few of you I know very well, and the rest I'd love to meet and get to know more. So I'll prepare, share half the time and go pretty quickly through my slides. Apologize, I'll say next a lot because there's a lot of pictures, and then give the time to Andrew Fry to present the portion of the research that he's doing too. So as Commissioner Sittard said, the Center for Energy Research Center was set up in Emery County to help coal community diversify and invest in developing all sorts of alternative energy technologies. So you go next. Here's a picture of our facility that we have in Emery County, and we like to view it as a miniature national lab because we're looking to start from our humble beginnings and do very great things. We're focusing on nuclear energy and advanced coal power, but looking to expand in a lot of different energy and even water sectors. Next slide. And we also have acreage for an industrial park, so the technologies that we develop can also be commercialized and manufactured on site to bring more industry and jobs to the community. Next slide, please. And a large portion of the investment went into the nuclear facility, where we have state-of-the-art glove boxes and analytical equipment for doing nuclear research. And so I'm going to show you some of the work we're doing on the nuclear side. Andrew will show the coal slide. But before showing you that work, I just want to make one comment. You can go next slide. Something that inspires me is a comment that Elon Musk has made. In this century, we're undergoing one of the most challenging, confronting one of the biggest challenges ever, which is our conversion to sustainable energy. And everyone can define sustainable energy for themselves. I'd simply like to define it as sustaining our energy supply into the future, because energy is what underpins humanity. And so that includes renewable nuclear energy, but it also includes utilizing our remaining fossil fuel resources, especially that we have here in Utah. as we undergo this transition. So I wanted you to keep that in mind as I do talk about these hydrogen and nuclear and renewable things we're interested in, but we're also very interested in coal research, and that's what Andrew Fryer will present. And next slide. And you've probably seen similar graphs. When we talk about all the fossil fuels, coal is the one that there's just tremendous amounts, 100 to 400 years or even more left, depending on how you define it. And so we have a very interesting opportunity, which we've already discussed this morning, to keep our coal plants running, notwithstanding our hydrogen and nuclear conversions to supply growth in Utah. And I'll comment a little bit more on that later as well. Next slide, please. So now I'll go through the various research efforts that we're working on at the San Rafael Energy Research Center. The first, which is kind of how the research center got started, is we are supporting a company called Alpha Tech in their development of an advanced molten salt nuclear power reactor, which has the potential to be the most advanced and versatile and economic reactor of the future. We're very enthusiastic about its development, have a lot of state-of-the-art equipment in-house to develop this. You can go next slide to show a picture of this will be a transportable reactor that can go to distributed energy in communities or at government military sites. And so this is a project we're really excited about and anxious to give updates as this progresses.
Mr.
Yes, go ahead.
Could you scale a human next to that for me?
It could fit on a flatbed truck,
I mean, is that about the size, maybe 7, 8 feet tall, 10 feet tall?
I would say. Yeah.
Okay.
About that.
Could we send it to the moon or Mars?
This one might be a little big for that, but yeah, similar ones.
Something
just a little
similar,
smaller.
yeah.
Yep. Actually, this would be a good size. It just need a big
That'd be
spaceship.
perfect, huh?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, second, the nature of the equipment we have is superb for this pyroprocessing, electrofining, and isotope separation. And so next slide. So another thing with a space application is when you can separate these isotopes from used nuclear fuel or other radioactive materials, you can make specialized batteries that can power mechanical equipment for decades without a charge. So the Mars rovers function in this fashion. We're working with a partner that wants to make similar type of batteries and manufacture them at our research center. And so in order to do this, you need a really specialized fabrication facility called a hot cell. And so we've been working with the state on and with our research center on putting that together. You can see a picture. It's where all the work is done enclosed in a shielded environment and manipulated with mechanical arms. Next slide, please. So this is where our high bay room in the facility where that fabrication facility would go. And next slide, please. Battery would be these configurations, something that could sit on the desk and here, and you could put them in remote locations where you need power for 10 or 20 years, like in the bottom of the ocean in Antarctica or on the moon and space applications. The next slide, please. Okay, and so advanced combustion, hydrogen, coal gasification. I'll just show you one picture, but then leave this for Andrew. If you go next slide. This is our L1500 coal furnace, which is a gem that we also have at the center and been working on for the last few years. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. I apologize, I'm talking fast. I just don't want to cut into Andrew's time and really excited to answer your questions. So hydrogen. So we are working with a company called Oxyon Energy based out of Salt Lake. They're one of the veterans. They've been at this for decades. They have a product that's actually producing oxygen on Mars right now on the Mars rover. They've worked with Idaho National Lab in the past. They're working on a next generation water splitting electrolyzer to make hydrogen that could be more advanced than the current ones on the market. And so if they're successful developing their product, they're interested in manufacturing it at our industrial park, and it can be a potential product that Intermountain Power Plant can be used to produce hydrogen in the future. So we've been working with the Intermountain Power Plant on a research study that can help prepare this instrument for their use. I envision the Intermountain Power Plant hydrogen conversion becoming the hub of the United States, transporting hydrogen to Idaho, Wyoming, New Mexico, Arizona, California, across the board. Once this project is successful, I think it will remain the leader for the indefinite future. And so we are anxious to support this and help it become successful. But as I mentioned, we're also enthusiastically supportive of maintaining our coal supply in the state. I was just speaking 2 weeks ago with the mayor of Eagle Mountain, Tom Westmoreland, and he noted that their economic development person has identified up to 3 gigawatts of electricity from data centers and other end users. And so it strikes me that we have an opportunity to consider all the ways possible in our state to keep our coal running as well. And at this facility, as I mentioned, Angela discussed, we are looking for ways to more efficiently use coal and continue its use. Next slide, please. Next, we've also, with some funding that federal funding that John Curtis helped us procure with appropriations last year, looking at ways to augment our water supply. As you're well aware, water in the Great Salt Lake is often the #1 priority we're looking at, and so we're researching thermal desalination technologies that have the capability to take unconventional water resources such as produced water from oil and gas industry and brine aquifers and extract fresh water, and then a brine reject that could either be put to replenish the Salt Lake and can augment our mineral recovery operations that we have here in the state. So another project we're really excited about, we're bringing out a skid from a partner company, and we'll be testing that in the next year and demonstrating that on representative. The first unconventional water source we're going to test is from a produced oil and gas well that Representative Steve Lund has been working with. He's going to bring the water to our site, and we'll study that. Next slide, please. So the medical isotope extraction and used fuel recycling. This is an aspirational goal, but it's quite significant with the specialized equipment that we have. We're in a position to recycle used nuclear fuel, which is an industry that has not taken off in the United States yet. But if it did, it would be the next big thing in nuclear since the inception of nuclear energy itself. So we'll click through a couple slides next. And I'm just showing you here some of our labs and facilities that we have equipped to do this research. A specialized piece of equipment there. Some more glove boxes and additional equipment. One more, please. A company called Oklo, or go one slide up. That company that you saw the picture of the reactor called Oklo, they're one of the leading advanced nuclear energy reactors in the country, and their business plan is to source their nuclear fuel from recycled nuclear fuel, as opposed to enriched uranium HALEU, which you may have heard of as well. And so we are looking to attract them to the state to set up their facilities. And if you go next slide, for example, a first recycling facility, and this has been studied by Argonne National Lab, if set up here, could take up half of our industrial park and be a $500 million project. And then we definitely agree. Thank you. Yeah, fire, right. Okay. Again, interested in all questions. I'm doing my last couple slides and turn it over to Andrew. So go ahead to the. Okay, so this is one that I'm very excited about as well, is when we think about a sustainable energy and transitioning our energy, there's 3 sectors we have to focus on. 2 are very easy, transitioning the grid and our transportation. We're already working on that as a country and as a globe. The third one is transitioning our industry to nuclear or other sustainable energies. And so we are working on setting up this research center to pilot and study and commercialize these technologies. So for example, taking a nuclear reactor, hooking it to a desalination or to a mineral process or to hydrogen production process, ammonia production, cement production, all those kind of industrial processes that are run on fossil fuels now, but could be run on nuclear in the future. So click next slide. So here you see a picture of a nuclear reactor hooked to a system that produces electricity, and then a system that's producing hydrogen. It's all done together. So we're in a position where we can retrofit our coal furnace to hook up to these industrial processes and pilot and demonstrate them at our facility in collaboration with Idaho National Labs. Next slide, please. And you're familiar with the TerraPower reactors that Pacific Corp is putting in. Those reactors will require specific training in our community. So next slide. Our research center can also be utilized for doing that training. Next slide. With various simulators, and we can we've been working with USDA Eastern to set up these schooling and workforce training programs. And last slide. Next. We're working with the company USNC Tech in Salt Lake that we haven't finalized the partnership yet, but are excited about the prospect of running tests and bringing some of their equipment for developing nuclear powered rockets at our facility as well. So turn it over to Andrew and the next presentation.
Okay,
Look forward to
thank
your
you.
questions.
Hey, thank you. Just give you a brief introduction to myself for those of you who don't know me. While the slides are coming up, my name is Andrew Fry. I'm a professor in chemical engineering at Brigham Young University, and I have significant efforts going on at the Centerville Energy Research Center. So yeah, go ahead to, let's just skip forward a couple of slides. So I'm going to talk to you about, we have many things going on down at the Centerville Energy Research Center. I'm going to focus on two of the most important projects right now. The first one is associated with power production from fossil fuels. I want to first state that this wouldn't have been possible if the state legislature hadn't come in and procured some equipment from the University of Utah and allowed us to move it down to the Centerville Energy Research Center. That piece of equipment has been pivotal in leveraging some significant U.S. government funds. And that equipment that we're talking about is pictured right here. It's the L-1500. It was built in the 1990s for discovering technologies to limit NOx emissions from coal-fired utility boilers. And it's been leveraged heavily for other interests since then. Go to the next slide, please. These are just some pictures of that facility as it's installed at the Centerville Energy Research Center. And go to the next slide, please.
So as you go by, you've got 1.5 megawatt sub TH. Is that theoretical or what's
Thermal?
Thermal.
So when you talk about a power producing entity, it's usually electric, and you size it by electricity. But historically, this furnace has never produced power, so we go by thermal. And usually electric is about 35 to 40% of the thermal capacity. I'll talk a little bit about that now. It's really important to help you understand the project that we're working on, that you understand how we make electricity. All thermal power generation across the world is done with what we call the Rankine cycle. And you're probably going, oh, professor stuff, I don't want to hear about that. But you know about the Rankine cycle. You've known about it since you were small. It's the process where we burn something or make heat in some other way to turn water into steam, and steam drives a turbine, turbine drives a generator. We all know about this. I've kind of given a diagram for the Rankine cycle here, and then I'm showing you a thermodynamic diagram. And I don't expect you to understand it. I just can't help it because I'm a professor. This is the pump. This is the boiler. This is the turbine. This is the condenser. And it turns out that that condenser happens at such a low pressure and temperature that we can't recuperate any of that energy. And that step in the system makes the whole system pretty inefficient. In fact, the power plants that we have in this state are on the order of 35% efficient at turning chemical power in our fossil fuels into electricity. So I think we can do things in a better way. Go to the next slide, please. So we had a program that we were interested in doing where we look at an alternate power cycle. It's called a closed loop Brayton cycle. Let me back up a little bit and talk about this cycle for just a minute. Here's the Rankine cycle on this side. This is the Brayton cycle. It's very similar. It uses the same kind of equipment, but instead of using water and steam, we use CO2. And we pump it up to a pressure where it becomes more like water. And we can do a similar cycle in it. But it turns out that the bottom end of this cycle happens at a much higher temperature and pressure, which means that we can recuperate some of that energy instead of wasting it all. And that also means that we can get to efficiencies that could be more like 45% in a power cycle. Go ahead to the next slide. So we applied for some US DOE funding to kind of demonstrate this at a large scale. Our intention in applying for this wasn't just for the power cycle. It was under a funding source called the Coal First program. And the intention was to develop the next generation of coal-fired utility boilers, which the purpose was to be zero emission, small modular, high efficiency, and really concentrating on waste materials. Our hope was to bring the demonstration phase of that project to Utah, to one of our power plant sites. And this was our foot in the door. So we got a $5.5 million project. These are the project partners that you can see at the bottom. They're big names in energy and energy development in the US. Go ahead to the next slide. So we've installed all this equipment. These are pictures. We had to tear our furnace apart. We had to put heat transfer surfaces in it that are very special and unique to a closed loop Brayton cycle. Go ahead to the next slide. And we had to install external equipment that represented the turbo machinery in a power plant, meaning the pumps and the compressors and the turbines and all that. And we had to install a big CO2 tank. Go ahead, next slide. So we've actually finished or completed the shakedown of this unit, and we have been running it for research purposes. We have tested it for 200 hours. We fired the furnace on both natural gas and Western bituminous coal. We're preparing shortly to fire it on biomass. Our testing so far has been performed to determine hardware capabilities and showed the impacts of load and fuel changes. You can see in this table at the bottom, these are our targets for firing rate, heat absorption, CO2 temperature and pressure. And what we've reached on the right-hand side, we're getting really close to our targets. We've cleaned some things up in the week since we ran it last, and we expect to hit all of our targets in the next running. Go ahead and go to the next slide. This is the most important part. We had DOE out. All of the stakeholders who care about advanced power cycles came out and looked at the facility while we were running it during our last operation. Those stakeholders have been in every lab in the United States that have been trying to do similar work, including the national labs, and they indicated that we're doing it better than any of them. They indicated their intention to move this to the next level of demonstration. They would like to see us actually produce power and do long duration operation. Those are two steps that are necessary to take this to commercialization. Right now, I'm working with them to find the right DOE team and funding sources And it's important to note that the funding that they're talking about is outside of a funding opportunity announcement, which means it's preferred. We don't have to go through those same steps. At the same time, we're looking at options, and actually we have received funding. Jeremy's received funding to use this cycle for nuclear molten salt reactor thermal validation. So this is a figure of our system as it exists now without this heat exchanger and molten salt reactor. Supercritical CO2 goes through the whole system and back to the turbo machinery. In the future, we are going to put an additional heat exchanger right here. And everything on this side, we're going to run molten lead through. And everything on this side, we're going to run supercritical CO2 through. And then we are going to add a molten salt reactor and run lead through that reactor. And what that does is it's an intermediate step in demonstrating the mechanics, the heat transfer, and the power cycle for a molten salt nuclear reactor. And that gets us a long way down the road with the Nuclear Regulatory Committee with demonstrating this technology and licensing it. So very exciting things are going on in this area. Next slide. So I'm going to go really quickly through the next stuff that we're working on. It's called gasification instead of combustion. And what this is, we're installing equipment and resources so that we can participate in research in a new area. All the stuff that I've shown you so far is turning fuel into power through electricity. We want to have the capability to turn fuels into other high value products and other fuels. And we need different equipment to do that, which are gasifiers. Go to the next slide, please. So I apologize. Some of these slides look a little clunky because they had animations in them, which died when I made it a PDF. We actually are installing a new building. The building is mostly designed and we're just about ready for groundbreaking. You can see this is the existing nuclear building. This is the existing combustion building. This is the gasification building. Go to the next slide, please. And inside it, we have a couple of steps that we're interested in doing. Number one, we're going to take an existing piece of equipment called a rotary kiln. We're going to install it over here. And then the next step is to design an entrained flow gasifier, which will eventually go here. And then we'll install that entrained flow gasifier. Go to the next slide, please. This is the rotary kiln. It has been donated by a company called Combustion Resources. We have refurbished it and prepped it for installation. It's just waiting for a pad to plop on. You know about rotary kilns, even though you probably haven't identified it. Everywhere you see a cement plant, there's a rotary kiln, and its purpose is to turn limestone into lime, which is the cement in concrete. You can use them for a number of things. They're just essentially a pipe that rotates that you can heat up really hot and keep oxygen out of. And when you do so, you can turn solid fuels into other things like char, pitch, or liquids. Some of the projects that we've already lined up for this piece of equipment is to turn or to produce coal pitch for aerospace grade carbon fibers. That's through Combustion Resources. We're also looking at projects where we can turn biomass into biochar for soil amendments, which impacts the agricultural sector. There's a lot of other things that we can do. Next slide. And I'm almost finished. We also intend to install an entrained flow gasifier. These are much more intense units. They operate at extremely high pressures and temperatures, and they can take most any solid fuel or refuse material, including municipal waste. They go to such high temperatures that they break essentially all the bonds down, and then they reformulate to hydrogen and carbon monoxide, which is syngas, and then you can make anything out of that. Right now, BYU Mechanical Engineering and Reaction Engineering International are designing one of these that will later be installed at the facility. And that's all I have. You can ask Jeremy or I any questions that you like.
Okay. Anyone from our committee would like to? Any questions? Go ahead, Senator.
Earlier, you were talking about on electrolysis and supplying states, surrounding states with energy. That's through water, right? The making the hydrogen. Can you explain that a little bit and how we would, how much water that takes?
So, yeah, you're correct. It is with water.
Pull the mic up because the people on the internet can't.
Yes, you're correct. Yeah, that process, you can do it with coal, with Andrew's process, but it does require a little water, and then water splitting with the Oxeon process, a little bit more water. And so from our understanding, I've talked with some of the Magnum folks that their transition to natural gas is actually going to reduce their water requirements. So then when they start splitting water for hydrogen production, that it's manageable. But if we were ever to expand and become a national supplier, we'd have to look at other unconventional water resources and for that to be acceptable. And so that's why we're researching that as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's exactly what I was wondering, is how the volume, how that works.
Yeah, so ACES Delta has done a lot of accounting on their water resources, and even with the water splitting for hydrogen, they're still below water usage rates of the current plant at IPP. You also have to understand that that process is, you're making a fuel in hydrogen, but really what you're doing is storing energy in a chemical form. When you utilize that hydrogen to make power later, you're reforming it back into water. So yeah, we destroyed some water, but you make it back again later. So that process is a net zero process on water. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So does that end up in the water cycle, so back in the groundwater, or?
So that actually it would end up back in their power cycle. And it would reduce the necessity to add water into their system with the raw water ponds and all that.
Okay. Thank you.
Interesting. Representative Briscoe, this will be our last
Thank
question.
you, Mr. Chair. Very exciting R&D. The only downside of R&D is you have to have someone who believes in R&D, which means they understand they're going to fund some things. Not everything makes it to scale or commercialization. Can you just talk briefly about your funding streams and how you're going to make all these great things? I mean, I'm excited to see a report in the future about, when it gets bigger, how are we funding all this?
So I'll let Jeremy address this as well. My focus has always been on project specific to completely eliminate the burden of the research on the state or the county. All of the projects that I've been running are either funded by the U.S. Department of Energy or through industrial applications. And we have several companies who have been funding us to do some of this work. So if companies are interested, that they believe that it's commercializable technology.
Okay. Make it quick and then, yeah. We got a caucus that we're supposed to go to it.
Oh,
They've changed our time on us to
okay.
go ahead.
I'll take it offline.
Yeah, take it online. We can get with you. So we'll go ahead and move on to Chris Parker, who, if you'd like to come forward. We appreciate you guys coming down, enjoying the sunshine, and
If you need time, we can skip the slides and just talk for a
it's
minute.
not too hard to talk people into coming to St. George, right?
No. So I was asked to speak about kind of fundamentally what a regional transmission organization or an independent system operator is for the marketing of power. And there's some stuff on the slides you're welcome to look at your convenience. In short, FERC has effectively created these entities called regional transmission organizations that are designed to manage the transmission system and a power market at the same time. The RTO slide here that has a map of them kind of lays out the fundamentals of what they are. And they're an independent entity. They take control of utility assets who are participants, and they run the markets and they plan transmission. So what that looks like varies. And you're all, I think, somewhat familiar with Pacific Corp, our largest utility in the state of Utah. And it's played ball a little bit with the California Independent System Operator, which is a sort of RTO. it's played ball for a few years in a market called the energy imbalance market. And this is in the day that we're in. It's a way for utilities and power generators to trade kind of the imbalances in their system. So they plan ahead of time, they try to schedule things out properly. And when actual time gets here, there's too many clouds or something else goes offline, there's some problem, and they're not quite right. So they all bid into this energy imbalance market that's worked pretty well for utilities. It's short of an ISO or an RTO. It's something like a light version of that. The utilities don't give up control of their assets for that. The EIM slide you can see in the presentation online lays out some of those benefits. And over the roughly 9 years that market's been active, there have been $1 billion of savings throughout the West because of the efficiencies created by a broader market. You're trading across broader geographic platform and with a greater set of resources. The California Independent System Operator is also right now working on what they're calling the extended day ahead market, which would capture even more efficiencies if it's designed well. And it does that by allowing all of the utilities that participate to schedule out a day ahead for their load and their needs. It also does not require full RTO membership. And you'll recall I said in the full RTO, the utility gives up control of its facilities. It's a little hard to exit out of one of those because the ISO or RTO, I use those interchangeably. They're not exactly, but we don't need to get into that. The RTO plans transmission and needs to serve the whole membership. So usually if a utility tries to leave an RTO, there's an exit fee that could be quite large. So there's been some benefit to these sort of markets light than the EIM and the extended day ahead market. I will note that those are California ISO products and platforms. The Southwest Power Pool, or SPP, is a market that participates in the Midwest and is expanding west and offers competing products that effectively mimic the EIM and what's called the EDAM. There's a lot of acronyms. The last slide that you can look at your convenience talks about some of the costs and drawbacks. Typical direct costs for a utility to participate are some, software, engineering, those kinds of things, as well as a grid management charge or whatever the RTO calls it, but it's effectively a fee for playing. And then they may get allocated a share of transmission based on who it's serving and how that works out. Some of the other drawbacks, though, are that, you give up control of your facilities and you're subject to the broader footprint and those transmission planning decisions and those allocation decisions. And those are jurisdictional at FERC. So there's a governance process within each RTO that establishes how they're going to set up their market mechanisms. And then those mechanisms effectively get sent over to FERC for approval of a tariff. And that tariff approval that's where the fight moves, right? Right now, if you want to regulate Pacific Corp, you regulate them at the State Public Utilities Commission and you regulate them in state statute. This would move some things. So that's sort of the nuts and bolts of an RTO. And I'll make way for some of the other speakers who can talk more about how it might affect their specific operations or other things. But if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them, but I know you're pressed for time. So.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and is Jeff Hartley, did you want to, and Kathleen Stock, she's going to be remotely. Okay.
Hi, Kathleen.
Hi, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jeff Hartley.
Hang on just a second,
Okay.
Mr. Hartley. Could we get Clay and Arthur and Nathan? Do you guys want to be up here where we can do a panel discussion and speed this up a little bit?
So, are you ready for me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Jeff Hartley. I've got Kathleen Stacks is joining us remotely, and I'm just going to take just a quick minute to give some context for the state of Utah and what we've been through in the last couple of decades. Just as a refresher, when I started working, I represented as a contract lobbyist Rocky Mountain Power for about 14 years.
in about 2008, when I started with him, the president at the time, Rich Walgy, said, Rocky Mountain Power will always be coal-based. Our fleet will always be coal-based. We've seen that transition over time. That's changed quite a bit. Some of you may remember that back in the early 2000s, Senator Mark Mattson ran a bill to facilitate an eBay build out where they wanted to use fuel cells as part of their power to supply one of their data centers. That wasn't allowed in statute at the time. We spent a year working through the technical aspects of that, changed statute to accommodate that, because that was a social desire by eBay to be able to use fuel cells as part of their power solution. Then some of you will also remember that not too long ago, even though our state likes to pride itself on saying that that the state doesn't pick winners and losers, the rooftop solar lobby got pretty active, and a couple of significant members of the business community got involved in rooftop solar. And then the ratepayers of the investor-owned utilities were subsidizing rooftop solar for a period of time, which was another transition of policy. And then you have the current kerfuffle over IPP and what that means for the state of Utah going forward, which again requires a change of policy. I give that background just to say, over time, since I've been doing this, the last 15 years, there has been transitions of policy, and preparing a pathway for a potential, and I say a potential RTO in the state of Utah, is something that should be considered. It may not fit perfectly. It may fit to some degree the way that Chris explained that Pacific Core's been kind of participating in California. Our friends from DG&T we'll talk about their participation in another RTO type structure. And my message is simply this: as we transition to what the future looks like, whatever that is, and hopefully it includes a lot of nuclear, because I'm a huge fan of what Jeremy and his team are doing at the San Rafael Center. As we transition into what the future looks like, we need to leave the flexibility to allow for different mechanisms of how we would trade and transition and transmit power back and forth. And I'll pass the baton to Kathleen for a minute.
Go ahead, Kathleen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee, for allowing me to participate remotely. I apologize that I'm not there in person. I usually really try to get there, and I had other meetings that unfortunately made this a conflict. So I appreciate the opportunity to participate remotely. My name is Kathleen Stacks. I'm the Executive Director of Western Freedom, which is a coalition of commercial and industrial customers across the West working on getting an RTO in the West. Our mission is to enable the delivery of low-cost electricity and energy freedom to the West through an efficient and integrated grid system. Western Freedom represents companies across a variety of sectors, including manufacturing, retail, tech, mining, and others. They're served by all kinds of utilities, investor-owned utilities, PUDs, co-ops, and munis, and we have facilities and assets across the West. Access to reliable, affordable, and oftentimes carbon-free energy is critical for these companies to stay cost competitive, meet corporate sustainability goals, and identify locations for expansion or new facilities. Unfortunately, the structure of our current grid and the electricity system creates barriers to that access by maintaining inefficient and costly constructs that limit regional collaboration and resource sharing. As a business-friendly state with top-tier natural and recreational resources, Utah is an appealing place for companies to expand and grow, but they need assurance that they'll have access to reliable and affordable energy. We still have a ways to go before we get to a Western RTO, but there's been a lot of progress made, and utilities across the region have taken steps that demonstrate significant benefits to customers. As Chris mentioned, some of those through the real-time market for the and proposed through the extended day-ahead market. Each utility has the ability to evaluate and determine what is best for its customers, and we've seen different paths for different utilities, even within the state of Utah. The West has proven that we're going to be a thoughtful, deliberate, and incremental in our market developments, but customers want to see those utilities continue to work to maximize benefits through additional progress. I think a couple of other points that I wanted to make, we've heard so much about the great innovation and research and development that's happening in Utah, and more regional collaboration enables those resources and those developments to have even more places in the market. And so I think that innovation is something that is only going to be enhanced by additional regional collaboration, and certainly end up with more ultimate, off takers for those new energy resources that Utah companies are going to be able to bring online. The mining conversation was an incredibly important one, and for companies like that to help us continue to move in this energy transition, and for us to do domestic development of those critical resources. Even those kinds of companies are going to need to be cost competitive, and access to that clean and reliable and affordable energy is going to be critical. I will stop there. Happy to answer any questions, and we'll pass it over to the next speakers. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ms. Sachs. Go ahead.
Yeah, Nathaniel Johnson. I'm the executive director with the Utah Rural Electric Cooperative Association. Thanks for having us here. I did provide a handout that just provides a brief introduction to the rural electric co-ops. Just for brevity's sake, there's 8 distribution co-ops, which are your retail distribution power providers, and then we have 1 generation and transmission cooperative, which is Deseret Power, and so Clay MacArthur's here with Deseret Power, and he's going to talk a little bit about how Deseret interacts as a market participant as a power generator.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Chairman and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to present here again. In the past, I've had the opportunity to speak to this committee on renewable energy and the energy markets here in the Western United States. My name is Clay MacArthur. I'm the Vice President of Power Marketing with Deseret Power, which is our energy trading function at our organization, and we are the wholesale and generation. We are a wholesale and generation and transmission cooperative owned by 5 distribution cooperatives that serve rural and economically sensitive communities throughout Utah, Arizona, Wyoming, Colorado, and Nevada. And so as you look at what our energy policy is for our communities, it's that we provide safe, reliable, and affordable power. That's the end goal of everything that we're doing. I'm going to talk a little bit today about our experience in the power markets here in the Western United States. Chris Parker spoke a little bit about the energy imbalance market, which was first introduced. I don't know if we have the slides up. The energy imbalance market was first introduced here in the Western United States in 2014. It was rolled out by the California ISO, and PacifiCorp participates in that. And through our participation in where our loads are located, we also participate in that market. And one of the things that was mentioned was that there has been $1 billion in savings associated with that market. One of the concerns that we have as we talk about these markets is that we not talk about just savings, but we talk about net savings.
It's actually 4.2 billion.
4.2 billion. Thank you. But the number that we're always concerned about is the net number, not the gross number. And that's the number that gets thrown around a lot, is the gross number. We want to make sure that these organized markets are proving net benefits. And so that's what we are always looking for. And so in 2021, with the introduction of more wind and solar here in the Western United States, it's becoming more and more difficult to reliably operate our grid here in the Western United States. And so to the west of us in Colorado and in southern Utah, a new market was introduced by the Southwest Power Pool called the Western Energy Imbalance Service Market. And you'll see that it takes in part of southern Utah. So we have 2 competing market designs actually operating or serving communities here in the state of Utah. We actually like that. We think markets should compete for the ability to serve here in Utah, that markets oftentimes behave monopolistically, and that competition is good even amongst the markets. And so we were an advocate of seeing a second market stood up and competing, and it has actually disciplined both markets to behave more favorably so that the benefits accrue to the ratepayer. which is important for our communities that we serve. And in developing the second market in 2021, we took a lot of lessons from our experience in the California ISOs in energy imbalance market and plugged some holes and fixed some flaws. And so we really see this second market that was stood up in 2021 as the second generation market, an evolution of the market designs here in the Western United States. And we feel like it's doing a great job of serving the communities that you can see here highlighted in blue in Utah. Next slide, please. Some of you may have seen over this last weekend when we initially put the slides together, it was not publicly announced, but on Friday an announcement went out that a group of entities listed here has signed a financially binding commitment agreement to bring an RTO into the Western United States. And again, the section highlighted in red will be the section of Utah that will be impacted by this or served by this new RTO market. And Deseret Power is one of those entities which signed that financially binding commitment agreement. And so we are excited to go forward with this, but it is a toe touch. We see this as a little bit of an experience with the markets to see how they will function. If they don't function the way we expect them to then we don't expect to expand our participation. But if it is something that works effectively, then we will broaden our participation and continue to see those markets expand here in the West. Kathleen mentioned a lot of the good benefits that an RTO can bring, but those are not guaranteed benefits. You can go to the next slide. And this is the slide that will probably, some of you who have seen my other presentations, this is the slide that, or the graphic anyway, is the one that'll end up on my headstone. This is that sometimes when we talk about RTOs, we think that they are all a very common, similar product, but in fact, they are very different. You can pay a lot more in some of those markets and then in others and get a much worse product. And so we are very involved in the development of these markets. In the California ISO's energy imbalance market, I served as the publicly owned utility liaison for all of the utilities that are located outside of the state of California that were participating in that market. And in the SPP WEIS, or Western Energy Imbalance Service Market, I serve on the Western Markets Executive Committee. So we're very involved in the design of these markets and the operation of these markets so that we can ensure that any benefits that these markets can bring accrue to ratepayers here in our state. And that's really important as we serve these economically sensitive communities. And so I've got here highlighted bullets of pros and cons. One of the big concerns that we have is cost shifting with these markets, that sometimes these markets can be used to shift costs from one region to another. And leaning on the market is one of the concerns that we have most often. We here in Utah have been the beneficiaries of a legacy of very robust and reliable resources. And as those resources have retired, we've replaced them with passive generation or variable energy generation, which has made our grid less consistent. It's much more difficult to manage. And we've done a great job here in the state of Utah of managing those resources, but we don't want those costs of managing those variable resources to be shifted to us and not compensated for it. So we're always concerned about that. Maybe two final points I'll make and then open it up for questions is that even though these energy markets are evolving and we are a cooperative, which is we are a small organization, we feel like we are very well set up to be successful in these evolving markets. And our ask is this: some of you will have seen that in some of the other surrounding states, neighboring states, the legislatures have mandated participation in an RTO. And we would ask that the state of Utah not pursue that course. We've seen that impair the negotiating ability of utilities that are residing in their states. We ask that you allow the markets to compete for Utah's business and not mandate that we join their markets. And with that, I'll open up to any questions.
Okay, any questions? Representative
What's
Briscoe.
that? In your RTO West, you've got a utility that's south central Utah.
Talk into the mic if you don't mind.
You've got a utility that's south central Utah and northern Arizona. What's that?
Yeah, great question. This is Chairman Albrecht's old
Arcane?
Yes, that's correct. Arcane's service territory in southern Utah, not
Okay.
their northern system up towards the Richfield area.
You have concerns about RTOs, but you're joining one.
That's correct. We think that
What are the benefits to Bonanza to join?
The benefits to join is that there are efficiencies, which was mentioned by Kathleen, that when you are going to these variable energy resources, you have to deal in very short time steps because the sun and the wind are moving very quickly, and we have to be able to respond to that very quickly. And the organized markets assimilate all of the data, bring it together, and then send out a signal. It's very difficult to do that in the old process, which is bilateral, calling people on cell phones, or excuse me, on phones or other older systems. And it removes those barriers and increases the speed at which we can interact.
Has it been good for your customers, your participation in the CAISO EIM?
Yes and no. There have been significant cost shifts that worry us. We feel like we are not being adequately compensated for the services that we are providing. In that respect, the answer is no. We don't feel like that has been a benefit. We don't think that Utah resources are being adequately compensated for the support that they provide to the Western United States. And so there becomes a cost transfer or a tax on Utah ratepayers, and that is being borne by Utah ratepayers.
Do you think that'll be different in the RTO West?
In the RTO West, yes, we do. We've already taken steps to make sure that policies in other states do not result in cost shifts to Utah ratepayers. Good question. That's one of the key reasons why we're heavily involved in the market design. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Just a quick question. The difference between the two, is that because of one is energy related and the other one's capacity related, or how?
Do you mean
follow up with Representative Briscoe? How is one better than the other?
Do you mean the comparison of the California ISO market and the SPP market, or
Yes.
the SPP? So what I will say is, in the market, prior to participation in the market, there is what's known as a resource efficiency evaluation. You can't show up to the market deficient. It's like a credit check. Before you can participate in the market, they do a credit check on you. You can't play at the table if you don't have adequate capital with you. And they do this credit check, and some of the credit checks are inadequate. They knowingly can come to the table with resources that cannot be delivered to load and be deemed to be resource sufficient. And so when they go to the open market, then they are drawing on resources that are in Utah without adequate compensation. In the WEIS market, which is run by SPP, we fixed that structurally so that when you show up to the market, it has to be demonstrated that you can deliver your resource to your load before you can participate in the market. And so that was a big hole that was fixed, and that prevents some of that cost transfer. One of the other things that we did was we ensured that policies that are enacted by some states that result in costs may only be allocated to citizens of those states or ratepayers in those states, and that loads in Utah would not be eligible for that cost allocation. Thank you.
Oh, appreciate your presentations from everyone and everybody that's participated today. We know a lot of you have traveled a long ways, and we appreciate it a lot. And with that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay. Representative Jack, all in favor, say aye. We are adjourned.